Something else taken care of, if she's, when she's there, I can ask her.
Right.
All right. She doesn't have to
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting. So Beth, would you call the roll, please?
Paul Anthony,
I'm here.
Robert Brooks, John Hayes, Ron Heckman, Larry Hemberger, Mike Sturshik.
Here.
We have 4, so we do have a quorum.
Okay, so Beth, is there any public comment?
No, sir.
Seeing none, I'll have a motion for approval of the meeting minutes of February 23rd.
So moved.
Moved by Mike, second by Larry. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes pass. Todd, you're on internal financials.
It should be interim, shouldn't it?
There you go. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Got the firefighter in there. I feel safe. I'm going to start off with the final internal financials. In January, we did our kind of preliminary numbers, and then we do a final one right before we do the audit. And there is a difference this year, a significant difference, because of a lot of changes that happened. So we want to bring it to your attention. It's a positive number. One of the big things was, well, I'll start off here. You can see that in December, we estimated net income of about $6.4 million. We ended the year, after all the final adjustments, about $6.8 million. So we were a little bit better than what we originally had in I guess January when we presented this stuff. But there's been a lot of adjustments. We had a major adjustment in our airline settlement. We accrue during the year what we estimate that we're going to have to pay the airlines. That number was actually over $1 million that we had in there. Our final number was about 441-ish. So you can see that there, that's a big difference of over $700,000 in that adjustment. And most of that you see in the revenue. So when we show revenues, if we anticipate a settlement, we have to reduce that by money that we would have to give them back. So that's kind of our estimate. The other thing is we had a huge adjustment on our pension. Those are two that we kind of highlighted there. Last year on the union, at the end of the year, we were 116% funded. We ended the year about 91% funded. And the same thing on the non-union, we were 110% funded, so we were overfunded, and we ended the year about 87%. So those have to be reflected in the kind of financials. We do a lot of accruals as far as vacations, a lot of things that take more time. So that's why there's always kind of a preliminary number. But this year we wanted to bring it to you because it was such a big adjustment for a lot of things that we didn't really see coming at the time. So we just kind of want to bring that to your attention. Then the next slide, I have to hit the, there we go. This is the settlement number, and it's really important, for particularly for people that haven't been around, and we talk about this a lot. And then we settle up on the airfield, the apron, and the terminal. And so you can see there that budgeted number for the landed weight. We were billing them at $4.82 per landed weight, per 1,000 pounds of landed weight. That's what we were billing them when that was our budgeted number. Our final number when we settled was 4.63. So that's actually why we owe them money. The reason we were able to kind of give them money back, so to speak, was we attributed $533,000 of CARES money toward the airfield to kind of lower their rate. Because again, we're in competition, our rates are high, so we have to kind of keep them lower so that we can retain our business. So that CARES money, and a lot of it we use through the year, is applicable to their airfield rate, to their landing rate. So that rate, like I said, we put in $533,000. Without that that subsidy, that landing rate would have been $5.10. Yes.
So what happens when obviously CARES is gone? And
that's why I'm bringing it to your attention. It's something we are aware of and we're kind of keeping an eye on. But again, you know, airlines are very sensitive to their cost. And, you know, as much as we want to take care of things and do things, we know our costs are high. So we have to kind of manage that cost. At one point, we had talked about having a landed rate below $4. Obviously, that's a dream at this point. But you can see that, you know, $5.10 is something that we're concerned about. That's why we've been very strategic about using the CARES money and not using it all front. Because we could have used it the first year, and that would have dropped that rate significantly, and then they would have said, what have you done for me lately? Then we do the apron. Now, keep in mind that on the landing fee, the thing that happens for us is we get more landings that actually benefits us. Because more landings, it's basically cost divided by the landing weight. So if you think about it, so we have our costs, we got more landing weight, that helps us out, right? We can say, hey, because again, we're using about 35% of our actual, you know, capacity as far as landing. So we got a lot more capacity. So a lot of that infrastructure, a lot of things that we're paying for, if we got more traffic, it obviously lowers the cost. So that,
Right. So landings, commercial and also cargo.
Yes.
that is correct.
Aggregate, okay.
That's correct. Apron, again, same thing. That's just around the actual landing strip, but you can see that one we didn't have to use any CARES. And the passenger airlines had a budgeted number 68. Their final apron fee was 61, so that worked out well. Cargo pays a subsidy for all the other stuff we do for cargo, so they pay 106. Or should I say they had a budgeted rate of 106, their final rate was 97. So that actually gave them a rebate on the apron without any subsidy. The terminal is always the biggest challenge that we have because the terminal doesn't change if we get more activity. It just gets divvied up differently. So the overall cost, if you think about the rent is the rent is the rent and the square footage is the square footage. So all you do when it happens is if we get more passengers, it's just divvied up differently. It doesn't change the number. Not like landing rate or apron where you're getting more landings and more money. This is, here's what you pay every month, and instead of me paying 20%, now I gotta pay 25%. It doesn't change the number per se. So you can see our budgeted number was $88.73. Our final number is $86.18, and you can see where a lot of our subsidy is on the terminal because that's where we have the most challenges with as far as the airlines because we use the terminal as well. So they only pay for the space that they use. So you can see that we almost had 1.3 million of CARE support there, which would have taken, if we take that away, that would have taken us over $100. That would have been a 17% increase. We also, on the terminal, because it's such a sensitive area, we give them what's called a revenue share. So we kind of help them out in addition to CARES that's focused more specifically for the airlines. So when we do the direct revenue share, the only ones who really get that are the airlines. CARES, everybody gets. Everybody who uses the square footage gets a break on that. But that one we do to kind of lower our rate. And again, to Dawn's point, you can see that without that revenue share, we're down to 115.36. So again, it's this stuff that we're working on and we're conscious of, and there is a method to our madness, but it is something we always are conscious about. And what we always want to do, we kind of, and we talk about our budget and stuff, but it's really kind of a, under promise as far as what we think we're going to cost are going to be. And then obviously we're in a position to give them money back. Years ago, we used to do it the other way. We'll give you a lower rate, and then at the end of the year, you owe us money. Not exactly something that people like to do over time, so the fact that they get money back kind of lowers the tension in the room. Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the terminal rate going to change with the new connector going
Yes.
online? And what's the percentage impact going to be? Probably an estimate.
It's hard to say per se. I mean, it really going to depend on who's using what space because we have TSA and there's some other space. But again, any infrastructure, all that, they got to pay for. So that's just additional cost to have. And again, if you can lower the cost of the landing rates, because that's something with more flights in it. Now you got to remember, cargo carriers do not use the terminal.
Right.
They don't pay for it. So that's another thing
Right.
that kind of cripples us a little bit on the terminal. But again, it's something we are aware of. We do our best to manage it. And one of the things we've been doing is kind of giving a different rate throughout the year for Wiley versus the main terminal, and that's going to kind of go away with the connector.
Okay.
So that was an old way of doing things, but that's, change is tough. So again, it's just kind of giving you an idea of where we ended up. We ended up better than obviously we had originally put in our numbers, but we just wanted to bring it away because there's a lot of moving parts at the end of the year with things moving with the pension and accruals and obviously the airline settlement. But there were some big numbers, but it still ended up being better than what we had in our original budget. Any questions? Okay. Hey, Frank, how are you? I'll stay up for the next one, but I don't know if I kind of get an introduction to go into that. I think you have to approve the internals,
Except,
accept the
I'll
internal.
move to accept the internal
Internal.
financials.
Charles, second.
Okay, thank you. And then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Put you to work, Frank. Put you to work.
You know, we wouldn't, good thing Frank's here to kind of take us home here, we'd be in trouble. All right, then we'll talk about,
Start button.
February and what happened with February. So always mark in the green there, what our best, period was during this time period. So you can see at the top there, that 70,732 was our best traffic during that time period. So, and that was right before the pandemic. So we had almost 71,000. We were humming along, obviously, before the pandemic hit. But all things considered, we're much better than we were last year, 22% more. So pretty good stuff. As far as year to date, we're doing pretty well. I mean, you can see we're pretty close to where we were in 2020, only, maybe 1,000 or so passengers off from where we were in 2020 when we were really humming along before the pandemic. And obviously much better than we were in 2019, which is our benchmark year. But you can see Allegiant is kind of driving that again. Allegiant, 69, look where we were last year, 47,000. So that's over 20,000 passengers more year to date than we had last year in Allegiant. That's significant. And then you can see what's going on with the legacy carriers. They are improving, but obviously they're a far cry from where they were in 2020 when they had 77,000 of traffic, and now we're at 62,000. But it's getting there, slowly but surely. Hopefully more business travel will come in, and we're kind of anticipating that more next year when things kind of get themselves more in place with some of the infrastructure and also with the crews for the airline. So they're just kind of doing some consolidation. So we're hoping that that'll increase flights and all that next year. But at this point, all things considered, you can't be too upset. Talk about versus all airports. And you remember last month we were really humming along. We were above the recovery rate for versus all airports. Now, year to date, we can see we're a little bit behind, and some of that's the seasonality of our business, and our business model is a little different than all airports with our low-cost carrier Allegiant. So it's a little different. But you can see, positive is positive. You never argue when you got a profit, right? You never argue when things are going in the right direction. So all airports, throughput is up almost 11%. We're up slightly over 5%. Seats, again, we're up 6%, all airports are up 7%. So again, while it's not as high as the all airports in general, still positive is positive is positive. Then if you compare us to our peers, they would love to have numbers like that. So you can really see when you drill down on kind of like airports, you can see that peer average for throughput is like a minus 24. And a lot of that, if you go back to what I said before, is really tied into the legacy carriers. Right? Remember we added that crew base for Allegiant in February of 2020. So that's helped us out a lot. But if you just look at what's going on with the legacy carriers, they're down 20%. So that's what everybody else is experiencing in our peer air group. But you can see we're doing well. Remember, White Plains is dealing with Breeze, another low-cost carrier. That's why they're ahead of us there. But you can see, we got positive numbers. Everybody else has got negatives. So when I talk about we're not as good, everybody else on that list would go, man, I'd love to have a positive number. So that's good stuff. Then you could talk about where we were for February. Again, we had a really good month. Now this month we drew, should I say, February we withdrew about $1 million of CARES. So that's in that number there, that 1.3 number. But again, it's still a positive number without CARES. I'm always looking at without CARES, kind of to Dawn's point, like what's going to happen when there's no CARES, and that's why we always bring that up. Positive income, again, some of that's better. It's based on higher traffic than we anticipated. We've had a really mild winter. We had about 36,000 year-to-date in snow, that actual snow, and last year we had almost 250,000 for the first 2 months, and in 2021 we had over 300,000 in snow. So again, you can see the impact of snow, and that's just directly related to snow, not to mention the temperatures and electricity and all the utilities that we benefit from because of the milder winter. And this is just kind of recapping the year-to-date. Again, we're starting off really well versus budget. You can see 768 without CARES, still a positive number, way ahead of where we thought we would be versus budget. So again, good stuff. Breaking down, where the money's coming from in our profit centers. CARES obviously at the top, followed by parking. You can follow down, and you can see down at the bottom there that terminal number. You can see it's $360,000 of net income negative. Why is that? Because of all the subsidies that I told you about earlier. All those subsidies, when you take those away, and this is just without subsidies. This doesn't say with subsidies. This is saying we are subsidizing $360,000 year-to-date on the terminal. And you can see what's happening on line 6, where am I at? Line 5, excuse me, on the airfield. Additional traffic means we're a positive number, but it's not going to help you on the terminal. Then breaking it down again, we benefited from salaries and wages. Some of that is some of the snow that we anticipated we would pay, because that's a premium rate for a lot of our employees. We didn't have the snow, so that's helped us out. Some of it's headcount. But again, that parking revenue is directly related to activity. You can even see it on the supplies there, because we didn't have to spend as much on materials and supplies because of the weather. That's helped us out as well. Interest is up because interest rates are up, so we're earning a little bit more money on our interest, on our money, should I say. All right. Then you could just talk about, we always talk about the overall, what's going on, and then kind of mirror. Personnel costs, 11% for the month. Year-to-date is 12. Non-personnel 12, so they're kind of running neck and neck. It's so early in the year. Some of that's headcount, some of that is the snow, but some of that's timing. I mean, it's early in the year, and we anticipate certain expenses, but they could be pushed back to later in the year. So I don't get too excited when it's, positive early in the year, but it's still a good way to start off. And you can see at the bottom there, kind of year-to-date, kind of showing, again, that even though we've got room to grow on the budget, we've really kind of picked it up significantly. 11 bodies on the full time. And you can really see we went from 176 January and February of 2021 to 214 now. So again, we're moving, and obviously when you're moving, it is, it's a good thing, but it's never as fast as you want. And then when it goes the other way, it goes faster than you want it to go. And then we're talking about cash, and this is just kind of the 6-month look here. Most of the stuff is in the yellow there. This is our timing. That's the ones that we change a lot, just because of some of the moving parts with some of our grants. They move from month to month and some of that stuff, and some of the payments. But you can see there that line 11 is one of the things that changed, is the final number that we think for that settlement of $441,000. And that number, we showed a number that was lower than that, than we had budgeted, but that number was, I think we had on there about 900,000 that we thought that's more money in our pocket. The other ones are just timing. Again, you can see on line 13 there what's going on with the connector. You know, again, that's a reimbursement, so it's where we think we're going to be. But if you get down to August, that would kind of be all the money left over that we have from that connector alone out there. So it's just kind of figuring out the timing of that. And then we got some additional PFCs. Some of that I'm assuming is attributable to the Denver. And that kind of gave us some additional PFCs that more than we thought we would get. So that's a good thing on the PFCs there. Passenger facility charges, we get that on flights. So that's based on when they were booked and not necessarily when they come in. So that additional flights that came in, I'm sure have helped us out there. And you can see again, when I was mentioning earlier, line 19, is just the timing of some of the capital payouts and the timing of some of the grants. It doesn't change on over a 12-month period significantly, but the changing from month to month does change. And then you can see there the AIP restricted. That number is actually went up because we've gotten the money, some additional grant money that is restricted for some of our boarding bridges. So that's in there as well. We got 1.7 million. That can only be used for the boarding bridges. So that's why that number went up. You can just kind of see the timing of that. You can see that there in 106. And some of those numbers, like I said, they changed. But again, it's really, some of that's timing. I mean, really when you focus on the connector stuff, you're talking a couple $1 million month to month. And some of the grant stuff, it can really make a difference in the short term on your cash. But long term, it should work itself out. And you can see that black line there is 60 days cash, which is, after contingencies and reserves, and we never want to kind of go below that line before we start really hitting the panic button. So we got enough room and enough cushion there, and again, this just kind of shows a 12-month view. Any questions?
Could you go back to the previous slide?
Sure. This one?
Line 30, why doesn't it go to August?
Line 30, it goes to August because,
I mean, there's nothing in August.
right, because what happens is that's kind of a placeholder that we put in there. So that's not real debt service. That's just kind of like, because that's kind of what we're holding in place of the real debt service. So when you get down to August, we'll be paying the full debt service. So there's no need to kind of hold a reserve for that number.
Gotcha.
No, great question. Any other questions? And again, this is just cash because it's kind of like, somebody says you're going to buy a car. So, hey, it's going to be $300 a month. That's kind of what we're doing here. So I'm going to put that $300 in a month in the bank every month, anticipating paying that car payment. That's kind of what we're doing here. Yeah. Same logic, but it's not a real payment. It's just kind of reminding you that at some point you're going to have to pay that, and it's kind of accounting for that in the reserves. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, thank you.
So I need a motion to accept the financial statements for presentation to the board.
I'll make the motion.
Paul,
I'll second.
Mike second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're accepted. Any new business? Excellent, and then a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion. Second.
All in, Mike, and we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Frank. All right, we'll roll right in here to the Business Committee. Welcome to the March 23rd Business Committee. Select and take a roll call, please.
Justin Grimshaw,
Here.
Don Godshaw.
Here.
James Irwin.
Here.
Jeff Maskin. Glenn Reedman.
Present.
Chris Worley. No quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
No, sir.
All right, we'll start with approval of the minutes from February 23rd. Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, minutes passed. So for the next three things, we're gonna have Ryan up there, so you wanna take a step up there, Ryan? We're gonna start with the EMAS bed seam reseal.
Great, thanks, Justin. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So we wanted to go through here as a project that's been on our CIP. We did a similar project last year, but it's to approve Runway Safe Incorporated to perform the Runway 31 and EMAS bed seam reseal. So just as a quick reminder, the EMAS bed is our engineered materials arresting system at the end of runway 1331. It's kind of like a crushable concrete. It's been in place for about 7 years, and about every 5, preventative maintenance is recommended. Runway Safe is actually the only manufacturer certified by the FAA to do the repairs, if you recall from last year. So in the breakdown, as you see in the analysis, the CIP, we budgeted $480,000. It's just under that, for $477,000. The actual replacement's about $440,000. And then before they do that, they actually do a strength test to make sure that it's still, meeting the properties when it was installed. We are coordinating with them and our maintenance and ops personnel that if we actually get the project done in April, which is the plan, obviously weather pending, we can actually get a 10% discount, which is about $43,000 off. So the approval is for the full amount, but hopefully, again, if we do it in April, that cost will actually be less. And again, as I mentioned, Runway Safe's the only enterprise, again, that the FAA has validated. There's a letter in there. I know last year, I had conversations with legal, same company. So really, we're looking for approval for the proposals to enter in a contract with Runway Safe Incorporated in the amount of $477,917 for the preventive maintenance services and testing for the EMAS bed on the runway 31 end. And in parentheses, we got runway 13 departure because that's the way they actually list it, just from their perspective. But it's the physical runway 31 end, physical runway 13 end is what we did last year.
It's the end closest to the Airport Road 22 interchange.
Yep.
So I would like either you or Tom to explain the process of the company that merged, went out of business, merged, and how we ended up with only one company.
Yeah, I think, so going back to 2015, when EMAS beds, there was a mandate by FAA for all commercial service airports to have their safety areas in compliance. And we easily accommodated that on our primary runway because we have the required dimensions of turf area, overrun areas for that runway. With runway 1331 and the proximity of Race Street to that runway end on the north and the interchange on the south, we weren't able to get turf overrun areas. So the solution is an engineered system that we're talking about here. Zodiac, I think Aerospace was the company at the time who did the installation. It was the one and only company that could do the installation and performed the work on both ends of the runway, installed the beds prior to the December 31st, 2015 requirement, the mandate from the FAA. Since that time, a lot of challenge occurred because beds were no longer mandated because requirements had been met nationally. And so I know there had been a period of time where Zodiac went away and kind of came back. There was a number of iterations, and I don't know all the company iterations in between, maybe you do, but now Runway Safe is the company that's, again, part of that legacy from Zodiac Aerospace, and that's the company that the FAA still has as the only possible vendor for work on these EMAS beds. So I don't know, that's a long way around, but that's sort of
Well, my point of wanting you guys to explain that is everybody in this room knows I like local labor, and I like to keep the money here in the Lehigh Valley. And it's kind of impossible to do that because the FAA only has one, certified vendor. So I just wanted that explained because it goes against everything I believe.
You're gonna start a company.
I am not.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, I couldn't, it's a conflict. But my point of that is just because it goes against everything that I always stand for and, that I speak up about, so I just wanted to explain to the committee. My only other question is, and with the potential savings of the 44,000, we'll say the 10%, if we're good on our end, and we can make everything happen here, we approve it today, and we get it, we coordinate and everything, and then they can't provide the crews to come in and do it, how does that affect the 10%?
Yeah, we can find out. I'm not sure exactly, but I think that could be definitely something, again, if we're ready and they're not, based on them providing the discount, I think we could definitely push for that, if that is the case. Yeah, they actually have been very good to work with. Actually, last year, they actually mentioned there was going to be a cost increase from that, and we said, no, you got to keep it the way you had it based on the original proposal, which they did. So that's a good question.
Is there any other questions for Ryan on this? All right, I'll entertain the motion to approve it. Second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, we have our approval. We'll go to some discussion items. Ryan, you want to start with the capital projects update?
Sure. What I was thinking, if you don't mind, Justin, you can leave it up to that. I'll just briefly mention the other discussion item before we get into the slides.
That's perfect.
That works. So what we wanted to make the committee aware of is next month, we're going to be working on putting out a request for proposals for our on-call FAA engineering, planning, environmental, architectural consultants. So why I wanted to bring that up is, again, kind of back to the FAA. They have a process that for any federal and even state funded projects, we have to go through the RFQP process, which we generally want to do anyways in terms of being good stewards in terms of who we're hiring. But in general, about every 5 years, you go out for selection for our consultants. So that's like the Auroras, the ADCIs, the AECOM, all the folks that help us with the design and engineering on our projects. It's going out for teams. And the way we typically do that, just kind of mentioned to your point, Justin, is we have, there's a prime consultant and then there's sub-consultants within those agreements. So what we try and get is a mix of aviation-specific consultants as well as local consultants that do a lot of the surveying, some of the engineers, traffic studies, those kind of things. So it's kind of a hybrid, but we just wanted to mention to the committee, so we're looking to put it out in April. Probably take about a month, we'll get some of the RFQPs in. Could take about a month to review, and then from there we'll shortlist, which is when we'll come back to the committees for likely presentations and discussion before selecting the consultants. So I just kind of wanted to mention that in terms of what's upcoming. It's related to capital projects, but obviously it's a little different since it's consultant services. So any questions on that? Okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted to mention that. So what I'll do is I'll go through, as we typically do, major capital project updates. Then we'll go through the connector, and then we actually have Cedric Johnson here, speaking of consultants from ACI, that'll help us walk through some of the connector portions based on some of our discussions last month. So going through runway 624, we're getting ready to kick back up here in the spring, but you can kind of see all the light blue that we've done. The light pink areas is really what they're going to be focusing on here in the next few weeks, which I'll get into. I keep this on here really because we're really waiting for our final $320,000 from the FAA. They have the closeout, it's been submitted. We're just waiting for their process. Package 2, again, working on the project closeout. It hasn't been submitted yet, but in the next month, get that over to them, again, to get our final reimbursement as well. Package 3, all the work's really been done except for some punch list items, both administratively and on site. And they're actually looking to do that in the next few weeks. So again, close that one out and get our final reimbursement as well. In terms of upcoming work, Package 4, Taxiway Echo North, that's the green section right here. They started some of the amended soils and grading this week. Going to be working on that. And then starting in about 2 weeks on April 3rd, they're actually going to be starting to do this Taxiway Gulf relocation here. So we've been coordinating with the carriers and the tower because a portion of Taxiway Alpha is actually going to be closed while they do that work. So there's some coordination in terms of air traffic around the area. Package 5, looking to start up around the same time, working on narrowing a date, but really in the spring, in April. And as a reminder, that's the shoulder work along 624. Part of what we've been coordinating with, again, operations and the tower and the team is the work that they're doing on Taxiway Gulf, just right around here, won't conflict with the shoulder work that they're doing in terms of operations. So we're trying to time everything accordingly that way. Just talked about this, again, but added a slide, so we can update the committee as the work goes through. But again, this is what we just talked about for the approval. So Todd actually mentioned earlier the passenger boarding bridges. So kind of as a reminder, right now we have $1.7 million in grant funding. We're anticipating, we're waiting on some additional funding to be a total of 3.4. But really what we're doing here, we actually have the project advertised currently, pre-bid meeting end of the month, and then bids to mid-April to come back to the committee next month for award and recommendation depending on what we receive. But real quickly, phase one is procurement and installation of 2 bridges, a new one at Gate 3. As you may recall, a couple years ago, we demolished the one that was there just because of its condition. And then Gate 10 is the only one over the last few years when we were doing the rehabilitation that we didn't get to rehabilitate because there were some structural issues in the one cab. So that's included in this as well, to either get a new bridge or a refurbished bridge, depending on the pricing that we get, and the components of that. And then in terms of the additional grant funding, there's 2 other phases. Phase 2 is we're going to bid separately the Gate 3 structure foundations, because it's going to look a little different, but Gate 3 will still require a fixed walkway before getting onto the bridge. So walkway require foundations as well as the bridge pier itself. And then phase 3 is replacing the controls, the programmable logic controls on most of the bridges, as well as acquisition of some of the new PC air units, which is really what gives air to the aircraft while sitting at the gate. A little bit Hangar 7, that project's moving along well. In terms of the main office, you can kind of see in the bottom right, is really just getting touched up. In terms of the bathroom, I think last month I mentioned about the floor being put in place, but you can see the drywall getting into place for some of the tile work to start next month. So that's working pretty well. Building demolition is still on here, but really no updates since last time of all the buildings being demolished. We're just waiting for the warmer weather to do some of the final grading and seeding in those areas, as well as waiting on some proposals for some of the other building demolition that's not in that total project cost. So once we get that, we'll update those numbers. Moving on to Queen City, in terms of the design, 41533 is a reminder, this is the electrical components of the project. We're looking actually to advertise sometime in April, so we need bids in hand by May in order to submit for our June FAA grant application. So working on that as well. With the basically the runway lighting, the taxiway Bravo section of lighting down here, as well as an electrical vault as part of that process. In terms of the runway pavement itself, the construction, had a pre-construction meeting with the contractor. They're looking to start April 15th. You can see the different colors, which is the phases. So during that construction, runway 1533 will be closed. There's only about a week of night work where it impacts 725 in the safety area right here. So working on that with the tenants, the airport manager, and then obviously putting out the notices of construction for pilots. And then in terms of getting to the end, I made a few tweaks here just to hopefully make it easy to follow. As I mentioned earlier about the runway, the work is done, but as you can see, we're still waiting on the grant receipts. So I thought it might be helpful to actually show the differential there between the two. So if you look at line 3 as an example, that's package 3. We spent about 97% of the project cost, but only got 81% just based on the closeout requirements and timing with the FAA. You can see kind of with our LNAA share we had before, what percentage of the project costs are under grant, and then the percentage complete. So the big one, as even Todd mentioned before, if you look at the connector, which we'll get into later, but you can see we spent about 73% of the project cost, only received about 30% of our grant funding. One is RACP in terms of timing. We just recently received the 5 million ATP, so we're working on that reimbursement cycle. So just kind of for the committee's benefit, just kind of that's really where we are in some of those. And then the only other thing I wanted to add before going into the connector is likely next month we're going to be talking about some Hangar 2 boiler repairs. So this past month, I know working with maintenance and the capital committee we're working through is the inspection basically red tagged the equipment. It's from 1978, so it's a little weathered. So we're working on quotes as well as just making sure that what we're proposing to put in is really what we need. But just so the committee's aware, we'll probably be talking about that next month. So any questions on those before I move on to the connector?
Yeah, can I ask, so I'm confused on all the runways and all that.
Okay, it's a lot, yeah.
So off of Airport Road, there's an access and there's a job trailer.
Yes.
There's something going on behind the job trailer. Some excavating or blasting, what was that for?
I'm trying to think where you're, on north,
By the maintenance shop over in that
By the
Yeah, I don't
direction.
know, is that the main shop? Kind of, sort of by the old terminal. There's a job trailer.
okay.
Air products.
Yeah, it could be our products hangar.
And then there's a lay-down area for steel.
Yeah,
Yes.
air products.
Yeah, that's the air products.
hangar. Okay. I
Yeah,
don't remember that. I mean, did that come in front of the committee a while ago, or
Oh, yeah.
that probably wasn't on board yet?
Yeah, it's a ground lease. We're not doing the construction. We're monitoring in terms of operations.
Got it, so it's a ground lease for air products. All right, thanks.
Yep.
I don't know if you were on the board.
I probably wasn't, because I've been here a year.
I'm gonna take a sip of water. Wait, is it listening? So, as I mentioned, I have Cedric here to help through some of the conversations. But I'll go through kind of the update, and then we'll get into some of the project summary and some of the discussions, Paul, based on your questions from last month. So, in terms of where we are, 82% complete. You see the major work items completed. Go through some typical photos that we do. Ongoing. The biggest ones are really the exterior window frames and glass. As we mentioned before, finally getting the glass on site was a big component. TSA support space actually on Friday. This Friday, we have a meeting with TSA and their IT folks to kind of take a look at the TSA support space, do kind of inspection there.
Site survey.
Site survey, so that'll be good to get that continue moving. The terrazzo, as you'll see, has been going in the terminal connector, and they're moving on to the bridge. Metal panels, vertical circulation escalator, actually next Monday. The crane for that will be here, so we'll definitely get some good video and pictures of that. It's going to be quite the endeavor to get the escalators through the building and in place. So again, I mentioned upcoming work. It's really all those pieces that they're doing now, and then ultimately some of the site civil work in terms of the apron will get done as they continue to work on the outside of the building. So as I mentioned, the glass going in. A lot of this is actually the dynamic glass. You can see it's already tinted. Really what they do is they put up the frames, which is obviously electrically wired, and then the glass goes in, which is how it actually tints through that electric charge. So actually a nice photo from yesterday up on the roof, thanks Tom, with, again, seeing the windows going in on the curved wall, and then you can see on the bridge a lot of the windows on that east side have been put in as well. And I mentioned actually briefly, so basically this is where the escalators are going to be brought in down to the vertical circulation next week. So it's actually taken a lot of time coordinating with Schindler and their structural folks, again, just because of the crane that they're bringing in to kind of cantilever it in and down. Again, some of the TSA offices, you see those progressing. Picture on the left is them preparing for the terrazzo. Picture on the right is some of the terrazzo that's been going in. You can see that there. So it goes in, and then once it cures, then they actually come in and polish, which is where a lot of the shine, the aggregate, and then the color actually pops out with some of the blues and grays, which you can kind of see some of the blue up here. But right now, it's hard to see it based on progress. Again, more of the back end where the TSA offices are. Ceiling grid over in vertical circulation, getting that prepared. Again, that's where the center stairs, the two escalators on the side are going to go. You can see some of the drywall work there. Switch gear, I mentioned last month, did arrive on site, but they're actually in the process of energizing that now. It takes about a 30-day process, so working through that. Again, you kind of see some of the IT infrastructure, both ours and TSA's, so definitely a lot of cables that we're working through there. Gas meter as well as part of that. And just briefly, as we mentioned before, kind of phase one that we're working through now, as well as phase two, but you can see where we are with a lot of the components as compared to last month. And again, phase one, phase two is really what we're in now, getting everything up and running. And then phase three, again, which is kind of the less operational impact, again, with the tunnel, which is really just some of the finishes, getting the old TSA equipment out there, the secure exit portals. So, as I mentioned, what we wanted to do was go through, don't have that, too many slides, but really to, address the question, Paul, that you had, talk through where we are, because even as of 2 days ago, there's been some updates in terms of deliveries and timing, and I think it plays into really where we are. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to add anything before we.
No, I think that's perfect. I think we can ask Cedric to kind of walk us through some of the schedule.
Sure. Yeah. So you can, I'll stand to the side, I'll let you.
Thanks. So I guess first to start, and good morning, everybody. The U.S. national trends with regards to lead times and material costs, I'm not going to go through all these charts, but essentially if you do the research right now, there's an extensive amount of additional time and costs associated with materials. The red line here is delineating essentially when we started the project. So we got bids in November 2020, and essentially you can see just by the charts the increases in import prices, the increases in export price percentages, and what's going up. Again, not to walk you through every single chart, but the red line is delineating where this terminal connector project started and what's occurred over the last 2 years, whether it be freight. Note here, iron and steel and delivery and unfilled orders has spiked. So that was part of the concern with the schedule as we progressed through in 2020 when we started this project. So you mentioned the lead time scenario, just to kind of hone in on all elements of this project, the dark blue representing structural steel, the roofing material, the drywall, the doors and frames. Again, another spike in 2021 in duration on delivery on lead time. So that was somewhat of a national trend, not just local here to Allentown, and what we were dealing with as far as delivering the project on schedule. So what did that mean? We had at the top a baseline schedule with no acceleration, without putting any additional dollars towards. There was really a 120-day potential delay to our finish line, which was somewhat there noted in June of 23. The light blue delineating the opening the checkpoint, the dark blue delineating the tunnel. It's important to note when we first started this project, the two milestones were combined together. So we essentially initiated and requested an approval of change order 30, which the goal was accurate, was to accelerate the duration on the project and to deliver it earlier. We decoupled the TSA checkpoint and the tunnel because the goal was there to open the checkpoint. After we initiated change order 30, essentially what occurred is we were made aware of additional material delays, but still the goal of delivering before that longer duration up there at the top is still going to be achieved. So what was included in change order 30? First, the goal was open the checkpoint as soon as possible and minimize delays and impacts associated with those national trends that we saw. What was included in change order 30 was the skin that you saw outside, the temporary building protection, decoupling the terminal checkpoint from the tunnel, premium time allowance, the decorative metal paneling on the elevator, and then again, structural steel, the elevator, the escalator, and then other prime contractors were also accelerating their schedules and working with their additional material costs. What happened after? Essentially the switchgear, we were noted that the switchgear was going to be delayed. There was concern over that. There was a 4-month delay. The exterior metal panels that Ryan alluded to, 5-month delay there. Dynamic glass was going to be late, 5 months. We noted the weather in December because we didn't finish that temporary closure, caused a 3-week delay. The warranty on the epoxy, same thing. TSA notified us that they had a blackout on installation that was going to cause a 2-month delay. Ryan alluded to the site work outside, apron paving, because we were trying to finish in February. We weren't going to be able to finish the pavement work, so that essentially was able to be accomplished in the summer. And then a decorative metal paneling. Again, there was a delay there, and then finally the elevator and escalator and installation for decommissioning. Because the switchgear was going to be delayed, we had a 50-day duration impact there. Ironically, some of the benefits that occurred here is we were in position with the bill money, the infrastructure bill money, to capture $5 million, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if we were trying to finish in January. The apron site work, because now we're moving into the spring months, we can complete that piece. There's also community project funding, $600,000 that became available. And then we're trying to still work with the 4 contractors to avoid any additional price escalation associated with the national trends that are occurring right now. And finally, the new equipment, at the time, we had 2 lanes worth. Now we've got 3 lanes worth of equipment, and that install can occur in May. So to kind of back up a little bit and then move forward, we received bids in November of 2020. Notice to proceed was June 2021. We had a work stoppage of 41 days right when we initiated. That wasn't just construction, that was also administratively a work stoppage. So submittals, paperwork didn't move forward either. The micropiles I presented to this board a while back was a concern because of the unforeseen conditions associated with the micropiles. It turns out micropiles were essentially 50% deeper than expected based on the initial analysis, so there was a 52-day delay there. That's when we initiated change order 30 in June of 2022, again with the goal to accelerate and finish the project on time. After that fact, those items that I mentioned, the glass, the panels, the weather, the switchgear, the elevators and escalators, now are all targeted for April next month, 2023. TSA, unforeseen, had a blackout as well for 2 months for install of the equipment. And finally, the apron paving, the final metal paneling, and the elevator and escalators in June with an anticipated opening of the checkpoint in the June-July timeframe, depending on how we complete substantial completion. Another, just kind of walk back here from a cost standpoint, on the left there you have the 2021 cost. We had a construction estimate at that time of $28,825,000. The actual price was $24,500 of all 4 contractors, which was approximately a 15% savings compared to what our estimate was. That was why we wanted to go forward with the timing. That's why this board made the great decision to move forward with the bid process. At the time, we had a TSA commitment of 2 lanes, which is approximately $1.5 million out of their pocket, and we had a grant commitment of $3.5 million. The soft costs were 4.1. The total program cost was 28.6. LNAA's share of that was $24.5 million. We progressed to today, 2023. We did another estimate today based on those national trends, lead times, costs. Project would approximately been $38 million. We did add $1.3 million as part of change order 30, which pushed the project cost to $26.1 million. We got a commitment from TSA for a 3rd lane based on their remag request, so that's 2.2 from $5 million for 3 lanes. And then now, fortunately, the grant amount and commitment has grown from $3.5 million to $18.9 million. Soft costs were also included in that request to push it to 4.4, so $350,000. So now you have a project essentially as $30.5 million with that $1.68 million change order 30 request included. The LNAA share, due to the grant amount, has dropped significantly. That math doesn't equate because there's still essentially a couple $100,000 potentially from the other 3 contractors in requests that I've included in that number. So it would be $13.1 million, but a couple $100,000 from the other 3 contractors. So essentially, the LNAA share has dropped almost $13 million as part of this.
Yeah, and then kind of to dovetail on what Cedric mentioned, so the big thing we're working on now and actually having, we always have weekly meetings, but kind of an executive level weekly meetings with the contractors based on the timing of some of the materials. So you see here, we actually broke out the June-July timeframe because what we're seeing now, we got information from Labor and Industries. They're the ones that certify and inspect our elevators and escalators. That the timing of when we're receiving those panels, call them decorative metal panels, but it's the panels outside the elevator cladding, those have to be in place as well as the carpet, all the final finishes before we can get the elevators in the vertical circulation up and running. The reason that's important is because at the end of the bridge currently is our one existing elevator now. So new elevators have to be in place before we can demolish that. That's about a 30-day window to get that out of the way. So what we're working on in terms of timing, again, just with some of the conversations even this past week, is one, how can we expedite delivery of some of those panels so they get started on the elevator sooner, as well as, we kind of talked a little bit about the terrazzo delay with some of the weather, like we had talked about, but the big thing there is actually that the subcontractor working on that is actually having 3 crews coming in Saturdays to kind of make up some of that time. Again, part of that premium allowance of time that we talked about before. But then again, I mentioned, some of the costs of where we are. Cedric's point, because of some of those material escalations, the biggest thing that, again, most everyone in this room is aware of from our previous conversations is, even though we locked in our price when we did, everything else going on around us, from delivery times as well as costs to those contractors, it's kind of like Cedric alluded to, there's additional requests that are likely going to be coming in just based on things that were outside of their control, with some of our conversations. But in terms of where we are, based on some of the, again, materials, timing, kind of what you saw, had we not made that, investment with change order 30, where we would be. I believe that's the last. So again, just wanted to go through that, as well as some of the components or questions. So any follow-up or questions with any?
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap in there.
Yeah.
We'll stay on this slide. Amendments to date, what is that?
So what those are is, in the project, we have the construction allowance and contingency, like kind of Cedric mentioned, we got micropiles, other components. So that number includes the change order 30. It includes the micropiles. We have a whole list of items that are in there. It actually includes some additional equipment that we include as part of the checkpoint, those Ready, See, Go totems. So it's within that 30, it's within the approved amount cost. It's just additional items based on what we've either ran into in the field or modifications that we've requested based on, the construction.
So the amendments to date is what was included in the contract?
The construction allowance contingency was.
No, that's the amendments to date. That's the column I'm looking at, not the allowances or contingency.
Well,
Amendments to date.
Yeah.
Right.
So they are included in the contract. So
That's what's spent.
what you're asking. Yeah.
But they're an allowance in the contract,
Yes.
and it's repetitive. Both column on the left says allowances, the one on the right says amendments to date.
So it's of that allowance contingency, that's that
What's spent.
3.5 is what was spent or allocated as part.
Yeah, one is the allowance that's included in the contract, and then the other is the amount of allowance that was used so far as part of the contract. So we had a $1.5 million miscellaneous work allowance, and then there were 6 other allowances that were included. So for security, et cetera, and they added up to a number, and then we added the 795 change order 30 to that. So that's creating that 2.8 million, and of that 2.8 million, 2.5 of it has been utilized so far. Quote unquote, utilized through change orders. And I mentioned the $200,000 on the back end. You see, from a plumbing standpoint, electrical, with WindGap, they also had ads as part of change order 30. They were originally like $350,000, if I'm correct, and we added another 300. So to get it to 680, their change orders for material costs, for acceleration, switch gears also included in that. And essentially that's been completely utilized for these two, not for master mechanical. So there's been some ebbs and flows. I think Bracey's probably had 74 now requests, and we probably rejected 30 of them, but we
those
negotiated the others.
Right, those requests though were inside the contract.
They were, technically their requests here add up to about 4.6 million in requests. But as part of the negotiation with them, and hey, we don't buy this one, we do, we don't, we negotiate them down, the actual approval amount is 2.5.
Right, does that approval amount come in from the authority? I'm assuming not.
That was technically approved when the bids were in, because there was an
Right.
allowance that was coupled, and that was about 5% of the overall construction cost.
Right.
So at the time, we not conservatively, we assumed that, hey, look, there's gonna be some coordination and change orders as part of this deal, and that was the $1.5 million miscellaneous work allowance.
Got it. And then the 1.6 was approved at the authority because we,
And then we had change order 30, which added to that. We had a security allowance in there for $200,000, depending on the level of security we needed for the project. We had a micropile allowance in there for precisely kind of what happened with some of the unforeseen conditions, and we used some of that. So we did
Right.
have some assumptions there.
yeah, the micropile, you can understand, that's unforeseen.
Yes.
Well, when we're looking at delivery time and schedule time, that was all foreseen.
So the bids, their pricing was in November of 2020 before.
Oh, yeah,
that.
no, let's not go pricing, let's just go delivery. date.
Delivery times, yes.
Delivery times. We already knew that that was gonna be extended out.
For some of the elements we did. So after change order 30, literally contractor showed us letters with regards to the panels and with regards to the glass. So we had a manufacturer of the glass, which was Sage. They basically said, we have so many orders right now with the infrastructure bill, we're never gonna deliver the glass.
Yeah, I understand that.
So we had to change direction and we went with another manufacturer. There were three that could produce a dynamic glass. One said, we're never gonna deliver. The other said, we might go out of business. Okay, over committee and pricing. The other was like, we can, but we're gonna probably be, you gotta pay a little bit, it's gonna be some time.
I understand that.
So
No,
that's
totally
basically what
understand.
happened with the glass.
But I guess I'm a little, not confused, but my point is, we knew delivery was gonna be extended out. We still expedited the schedule and paid for premium time
We did,
to get that work finished, even though we knew we'd be delayed.
we did. And to your point, we sat with the contractor and they had a schedule and they weren't by the information they knew at that time for materials, the four materials. So steel, they knew it was one. They knew the decorative panel price was going up. They knew they needed labor, they had labor shortages. So those things happened. Right after change order 30, they came back and said, hey, we got some more issues with the glass and with the panels and with the switchgear. So switchgear was the other one, because that impacted elevator and escalators, because without
Right.
permanent power, we can't install the elevators and escalators.
I totally understand that. I'm just,
I guess
go ahead, Mike.
the bottom line question is, had we not approved change order 30,
Yes.
what would be our estimated occupancy?
So on this chart here, we had at least 120 days, and we did not decouple the tunnel from the checkpoint with the base contract. So potentially, that would have been, you can see the time frame there, in 2024 with completion. And right now, around the country, and we're working about 55, 60 airports, I think the number right now is 81% of construction projects over $10 million are anywhere from 30 to 40% late from a schedule standpoint. And then the cost is up to 35%, at least higher. So so to your point, the goal at the time, change order 30, was we were trying to push this date, decouple the checkpoint, get the checkpoint open, push it as far, just right past 2023 as we could. Okay, February, March, April timeframe. That's what we were looking for. Okay. After change order 30, we found out about the switchgear, found out about the panels, and closing the space. But in the end, change order 30 and what we did from a dollar standpoint still shortened what the duration could have been, basically putting us in an opening checkpoint on time versus being late, which is the red at the top.
But didn't I see a slide where it said 730 calendar days of construction?
There was 730 calendar days originally in the contract, so June 2021,
Right.
yeah, it would have been June 2023, would have been the 730 calendar days. So you're correct, that was the case. It was, but that was all coupled together. It was checkpoint, tunnel, vertical circulation, everything done in 730 days. And now to Ryan's point, we're trying to open the checkpoint on time, and then vertical cert and tunnel. Hopefully vertical cert will come with the checkpoint, but the tunnel will be after that. But the goal was to open the checkpoint, capture the 3 lanes worth of equipment. And yes, the material costs have gone up, and yes, change order 30, the change order 30 had some cost to it, but that cost didn't go for naught because it actually still put us in a position here.
Well, the other point I heard also is with that change order 30, there was also available funding that we extended our construction out, if I understood one slide.
That's correct, yeah, so.
$5 million.
The ATP program, the airport terminal program, which, wasn't really announced until the project was well underway, was really a bucket of funding that you can't use for a project reimbursement. So if we had finished the project at the time we had, change order 30 thought the project would bring that home at, we wouldn't be able to apply for that.
Right, so we don't have a 5, but we're allowed to apply for it.
No, so we wouldn't have gotten the 5 at all, because at that point, the project would have been substantially complete.
Right, but we are getting that 5.
Yes, we
Yeah.
are getting the 5, yeah, that's
Yeah.
committed.
Success rate for reimbursement with that ATV bill is like 0. Success rate for paying for costs that you have, that's the 5 million, plus the
And they
600,000.
were also very clear that they were looking for shovel-ready projects. I think we had one up because shovel was already active.
In the ground.
Yeah.
Understand that. And the other thing was you had the how do I call it, the freeze episode.
Yes, sir.
That was a 3-week impact, but apparently it had no impact on total timeline.
Yes, sir.
Based on some of the material delay, I don't know that it actually ultimately affected the project based on even TSA's blackout of when they're able to install equipment.
Okay. Even though the job was shut down for 3 weeks, there was no effect. If I'm looking at all the slides, trying to put everything
The
together.
terrazzo was affected, right?
Yeah, so basically what happened, epoxy got too low a temperature that the subcontractor wouldn't warranty the install. So they had to reorder the epoxy, which was a 3-week delay in putting the terrazzo floor in.
I thought a pipe burst.
There was a pipe that burst.
We didn't use this room apparently.
Right, yes,
There was a
absolutely.
pipe burst and they did the repair for that too.
Right, but that had no effect on the timeline.
There were 2 different crews.
Yeah, of course, you're 2 different crews, so that had no effect on the timeline either.
Right.
No,
Just last question is who paid for the repairs then in this room?
Contractor.
Did it?
Bracy.
Okay. I appreciate that.
And there was a little consternation, I think, from their insurance company on who was responsible, but they did pay, they covered.
Okay. All right, well,
There
thank you.
wasn't any consternation on our part. It was their responsibility. They didn't secure the site from the weather.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Sir.
My
Yes.
pleasure.
Yes, sir.
A voice from above.
That's all we had. Any other follow-up questions?
No, it's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Cedric.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think that was it for me, right?
That was it.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions for Ryan or Cedric while you're still here?
I didn't say much.
All right, any new business? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay, we're adjourned.
Discussion. Good questions, Paul.
John, you ready?
Is Glenn there, or you want me to chair it from here?
You can share. Go ahead, John.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go ahead and call the March 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Executive Committee to order. First item on the agenda is to call the roll. Sylvette, can you call the roll, please?
John Hayes,
Here.
Glenn Reedman,
Present.
Justin Grimshaw,
Here.
Mike Stershik,
Here.
Matt Turk. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks. Action items, first on the action item list is approval of the meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2023. Those were posted to Novus Agenda by Sylvette. Entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is approval of the Florio Pucci invoice from February 2023. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion on the invoices, or invoice, I should say? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is approval of the First Amendment to the ground lease option agreement with Majestic Hanover. I assume this is Darren?
It is, and I think Darren is joining us virtually, as well as Ed can join from Majestic, and I believe Joe Giuliano is still with us. Yes, he is. I see him nodding his head, so also on the call.
Ed and
Very
Joe,
good,
always a pleasure to have you at one of our committee meetings. Good to kind of sort of see you.
Okay, good to see you too, John, and Executive Committee.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, so just quickly, and I'm going to turn this over to Ed and Joe to sort of explain where they are with the zoning and everything and why they've asked us for this extension. just so everybody knows, in the ground lease option right now, Majestic was required to have the zoning change in place, and it basically references the option fee payment commencement date, which is actually April 1st. So they've come to us, they've been working through it, they've asked us if we could extend that. We're proposing a 6-month extension, and like I said, at this point, you can see sort of the talking points that were provided by Majestic here in Novus. But I asked we asked Joe and Ed to attend and kind of walk us through that, and be able to answer any questions. So.
Yeah, and Darren, thank you very much, and thank the board. Good to see everybody remotely here. We've been working really hard with Hanover Township on working through the project and getting everything just right so we can maximize value both to the authority and to ourselves, and get a project that the community can really be happy with. We came, as you can see in the notes, we came before the board on the 25th of January in 2022 with an extensive plan which would meet many of the requirements and things that they said they would want. That includes further setbacks from the community in the residential neighborhood. It includes changing the size of the buildings and reducing the square footage coverage. That was very well received. We've had numerous meetings with the township board members, staff, and with their engineering team, legal and planning. And as you can imagine, what happens with these projects is there's a lot of moving parts, and things get slowed down. And we are scheduled to go before the board next Tuesday. We're hoping to do our redo plan and our updated plan. We've had extensive work with them, and the goal here is to have a plan and put a plan in front of the board, which everybody can agree to, which will again maximize value for the authority and for us. So we're hoping that will happen next week, and we think the end is near in sight to getting these changes. We're just ran up against this April 1st deadline, and we're asking for an extension. As you can see, we've not been sitting around. We've secured about $6 million in state funding for the project, worked very closely with your team and led the effort to pass the Airport Land Development Zone tax credit, which will both affect this property and a number of other airport properties, incentivizing businesses to locate them. So we're working as hard as you can. It just sometimes there are some things that happen internally, and development can just be working with the township can be a little bit difficult. I'm sure all of you, John, you're in the banking business, and projects get started, and we have very aggressive timelines, and they get pushed back because we have lots of stakeholders. We want to make sure all our stakeholders are good when we get moving with the project, and we don't leave anybody behind. Any questions from anybody? Any specifics?
Open up the floor to questions for either Joe or Ed.
Anybody from the floor?
Go ahead, Paul.
All right, consideration, it's, the zoning change will be beneficial to the authority. How?
One, we believe that the present zoning doesn't allow for some uses which would be allowed for, Paul, in the changes we're requesting. In addition to that, we think that that when you look at the building sizes, we can make sizes which will be more beneficial. And in addition to that, we have a flex concept. And I think, Paul, being engaged in construction, you've seen a lot of this. Businesses are coming to us and saying, maybe we want to have one portion of a building and grow into the second portion of the building. And that opens you up to a much wider list of tenants and potential end users.
Joe, I appreciate the answer, but again, how does that benefit the authority?
We think.
Hey, Joe, can I jump in here?
Yeah, okay, there. Yeah.
So Paul, I don't think, Paul, you weren't here when we actually.
No, I wasn't here for when we started this up, so I'm kind of curious.
Right, so this is a revenue share base, it's a partnership between us and Majestic on this. So basically the way it benefits the authority is, the more rent this project produces, the more we get out of it. We get the percentage, we're getting 40% of the gross receipts on this after everything is, after everything shakes out. So by changing the zoning, permitting the additional uses, like Joe said, widening that pool of prospective tenants, that's how it benefits us. So Does that answer the question?
Right, so revenue share will benefit the authority, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul, I would have said that, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I understand that then.
Okay,
You know, the other part about the issues, you know, Hanover Township lost their recreational director. That's, that's BS, all right? We'll just put it that way.
But they also lost a whole bunch of other people, and the township manager was doing 3 or 4 jobs at the same time. And as you know, we only have so many hours in a day, and in those days can go by pretty quickly when you're managing 3 or 4 different business units in an operation.
I guess I'm concerned because I'm assuming we're in the early phases of this project, and we're already running into a delay.
We have a lot of money at risk already, and we're motivated to get it moving as quickly as possible.
I have nothing else.
Okay, do we have any other questions or any discussion on the issue at hand, the First Amendment to the ground lease? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the First Amendment to ground lease option agreement with Majestic Hanover Business Park LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the table. We have a second on the table. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Did I hear a no?
you did.
Okay, we have a no. I think that was Justin. I've got
It
a small
was.
screen here. Okay, we have one no. Motion passes as presented. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. Okay, next on the list are discussion items. I think the first one we have is Steve Connors with a presentation on operations and safety.
Yes, thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. So typically this time of year, I like to talk about how much snow we spent pushing around the airport all winter long. I thought this was a good opportunity because the second week in April is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. It kind of recognizes our emergency airport, our operations dispatchers. So I thought I'd just talk about that group and our emergency management group real quick. We do have a 24/7 911 center here at the airport. They are a good mix of full-time and part-time employees, a good mix of individuals with life experience around the valley. We have some career folks that work for corporations as kind of phone answerers. We have some folks working for the hospitals in their communication centers, some part-time employees that are working in the actual county 911 center. So it gives us that good experience for not only the emergency response, but our 80% to 90% customer service. So we're dealing with, you know, call-outs for maintenance when the escalators go down, or, you know, they need airport fences fixed. Direct dispatch for our police, fire, and EMS. So, you know, when Benay's here on his shift, they're the folks calling or dispatching our fire department for any EMS or emergencies. And then dispatching for maintenance, custodial, any after hours or standby call-outs. All of our mass notifications you saw in this photo of our operations center, they do a lot of the security monitoring for the airport. So it's that passive observation of what's going on. Really good at seeing, you know, lost bags or abandoned bags and kind of dispatching the folks to take care of that stuff. And then also the access controls. So all these things, somebody needs to monitor this throughout the day. And that's one of their primary job functions, to ensure that when folks are swiping their badges at a door and the door disapproves their entry, they know to dispatch to, you know, send somebody out to figure out why that individual is swiping a badge when they should. And once again, a lot of customer service calls on days like today when we perhaps have delayed air carrier flights. You can imagine that the folks calling the airport to find out where their flight is, they typically call us before they call the air carriers, and then we kind of direct them to the proper persons. The lost and found inventory, we just had a one of our dispatchers via phone assist a customer that lost a bag or an object, and he was actually nominated for one of our props awards for the efforts he put forth using the camera, calling custodians, kind of coordinate the response to find this individual's property. Some of the stuff we always talk about here with the training we do is, we talk about Part 139. That's really the FAA's regulations for airports. But, within some of their training, they touch on every piece of what we do here, whether it's even the snow and ice control plan. Dispatchers don't get in trucks and move snow around, but they kind of coordinate the calls for service from, air carriers. Hey, we have a flight coming in an hour, we need our gate cleared up. They make sure that the proper persons are aware of what the issue is, and so we can get that done in time for the arriving flights. So it's a great group of folks. Their job duty is kind of like a 911 center. At times, if you call them with an emergency, you're going to get the 911 center response. What's the problem? Where are you? Who are you? But other times, it's kind of coordinating that customer service for lost people having issues in the parking lot. How do you get to the airport? What happened to my flight? Where's my bag? It's all that day-to-day conversations. The other piece I'd like to touch on is our emergency management group, which kind of is that overarching coordination within the valley between our local, county, state, and federal emergency management. We're kind of in the local. We deal, closely with Lehigh and Northampton counties, some of the city emergency management. The cities and then the counties, and then Pima and FEMA. And our emergency manager here is Jennifer Bulgari. She's been with the authority since 2016. She manages the folks in the Airport Operations Center. Instructor in a lot of different emergency management functions, primarily FEMA. Colin and I are doing some self-studies so we can take some more advanced studies here later on this summer. She develops and oversees our structured training programs and conducts software training for our airport operations dispatchers, and it actually helps a lot of the other groups within my department with some of the more technical learning skills with this stuff. She does, as I said, provide support to the Airport Operations Center, establishes and assists in staffing the Emergency Operations Center. We tested that during our triennial exercise a few years ago, kind of set up a room where all the management staff, senior staff, some air carrier managers, we all got them in a room and they had to kind of play the game of a crisis here. Works closely with Colin with our crisis communication plan. Emergency and major disaster declarations and assists with cost recovery. She pretty much headlined the effort to get us reimbursed for about $90,000 from FEMA for the pandemic cost recovery. So part of our costs for dealing with the pandemic were reimbursed by FEMA, and that's kind of where she shines with that coordination between us and the federal authorities. And just some of the various items we're working on with her is, as I said, works closely with Colin for the crisis communication plan and our local air carriers. They have meetings once a quarter, I think. We sit down with our local airline managers to make sure that when something happens here, we're all talking from the same sheet of music, so the message is the same. Works closely with other EMS partners at our tabletop exercise every year and our triennial exercise. We're incorporating, the local EMS councils, all the hospitals, all the coroners, the Lehigh and Northampton County coroners, American Red Cross. So kind of headlines the coordination between those groups in the event that we have a catastrophe here. She's actually working on some NTSB training. When does NTSB show up somewhere? After something bad has happened. It's the National Transportation Safety Board. So we're working to get those folks in here to kind of have a media training session. So it's basically the NTSB's experience with when something happens, something bad happens, to get everyone locally kind of prepped for what the questions would be, how you handle the mass media here during a spectacular incident. Talked about this, our tabletop exercise this year is, I believe, August 22nd. We get a room full of first responders and emergency managers, and we talk about our airport emergency plan. We do a little tabletop exercise. This past year, we had 106 participants representing 45 agencies. Still kind of keeping the group small because of the pandemic, but I think based on where we had the location last year and the amount of space available, we could probably open that up to make it available for some more folks. And then April 2024, we'll be out, playing Airplane on Fire for our triennial exercise, which is in 2021, it was 172 participants representing 34 agencies. So it's a pretty big effort. But even then, in 2021, it was scaled back because of the pandemic. That's all I have. Any questions? It's just a group we don't talk about normally, but they're kind of the person sitting in the office and dispatching the folks out when stuff happens.
Good presentation, Steve. Safety is, I believe, in our mission statement. It's one of the most important aspects of our operation is everybody up, everybody down safely, and that we handle anything that comes down the pike. So I'll open the floor up to any questions anybody has for Steve. Okay, Steve, thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Sean.
it.
Thanks,
Appreciate the
everybody.
efforts of you and all your people.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list is the nominating committee update. I see Larry is there. Hello, Larry.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
All right,
At the end of the last meeting, John asked me if I would chair the nominating committee, and that meant going out and get a committee and put it together. And right after the meeting last week or last month, we were able to do that. Thanks to Frank and Mike, I appreciate your help. And that's where we are right now. We have had other people come forward and volunteer their time and talents as well. So, I think at this point I can tell them who the people are that we.
Yeah, I think so.
We have John Hayes, Chair, Glenn for Vice Chair, Justin for Secretary Treasurer, Lehigh County Rep, Mike, Northampton, Paul Anthony. So those people will be put in play. And we'll meet again in April. And at that particular time, we'll take a vote and slate of everyone next year. So.
Okay, sounds good, Larry. Thank you. Has anyone else raised their hand in terms of interest in serving?
No, but they could do it from the floor the day we vote.
Okay. Want to make sure everybody knows that's out there. Okay, thank you, Larry. Does anyone have any questions for Larry? And I want to thank everybody on the list for being willing to step up for the 2023-2024 year. Okay.
Thank you.
No questions. Thank you. Employee survey update. I think this one's yours, Tom.
Yep, I'm gonna pass that back over to Todd. I know your team is working on that.
Yep. So we reached out to, we got some information from SHRM on companies that do employee surveys. There was about 10 companies or so, and the cost is somewhere between $5 to 20 grand in the original information we got. So we narrowed it down to 2 that we're looking at, and at this point, we're just checking out references, and then we'll get back to you from there.
Okay, so game plan is to come back with a proposal for discussion at that point?
Yes, John.
Okay. I know we have different thoughts in regards to surveys at the board, but in the interest of time, I know we've got an exec session that we want to have today. We'll defer the conversation until we have the information that you're gathering in front of us.
Okay.
Everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Before we go into exec session, does anyone have any new business they want to bring before the committee?
John, it's not really new business, but I'm late. I guess I've only been here for a year. Is there some kind of proposal from Majestic, like the area they're covering, what they're asking for, that can be shared?
Yeah, Darren, can you get the backstory, back information to Paul?
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff, Paul, on
Alright.
what they're working on and sort of how the agreement,
Thanks, Darren.
summary of the agreement.
Sure.
No problem.
And I'm assuming there's some kind of map, because it's probably parceled out.
Yep. Yeah, I'll send you everything that we have.
All right, appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, that you'll have fun reading that, Paul. That was about what, Darren, 2.5 years of our life until that thing got wrapped up.
It felt like about 22.5 years, but yeah, it was definitely, it was a long time for sure. It took a
Yeah, it was a
while.
long time. It was a difficult negotiation as well to get it where it is. I obviously I voted, or I would support the amendment as done, but I think the backstory. Let's get that, in fact, Aaron, let's get that out on Novus so that all the directors can see it. Because even the directors that were in the room, it might be good to get a refresher. And we've got a number of people that are new to the board that weren't here for that process.
Yep, no problem. We'll get that out.
Yeah, and that's something we got to make sure we do as well as we go forward. When we have amendments to contracts that are pre-existing board members, we've got to make sure we cover the backstory.
No problem.
Yep. Okay, any other? I've got something for new business, but I wanted to give everyone else the opportunity first. Okay, very quickly, from my perspective, I had the pleasure of attending the Lehigh County Commissioners. Was it General Services Committee, Tom?
It was.
Okay, General Services Committee meeting last night. This was the annual presentation to the Lehigh County Commissioners in terms of the status of the airport authority and the 3 airports that we have. We had done the Northampton County presentation, which unfortunately I couldn't make. Back a little bit, I'm not even sure what the date was. Tom did an excellent job in terms of the presentation, went over all of the operative information that we needed to cover. We got great feedback from the commissioners. I was very happy to hear that we have at least 2 commissioners and a county exec who fly out of the airport frequently. So that was good to hear, including 2 of them who actually spoke very positively about the bus service we have going up to Newark. Commissioner Beitler and Commissioner Cole-Borge both travel a fair amount. Ron for pleasure, Cole-Borge for business. And they use the airport frequently, and they use the bus service up to Newark frequently to get to their connections. And they were very positive in terms of the airport. Other commissioners spoke as well in terms of the staffing. They didn't know that a lot of the staff that you see that are in Allegiant uniforms actually are airport authority employees, that we provide employee coverage for Allegiant for a number of their functions. So it was overall, it was a very good presentation and good feedback on the part of the commissioners. I would encourage everyone, we do these once a year. I would encourage everyone, if you do have the opportunity to spend in 45 minutes or an hour off of your calendar to go and just sit in support of the management team, and also answer any questions that might be directed toward board members by any commissioners or in Northampton County's case, council people, to make sure that we have the appropriate representation in place. I think it's good for everyone to see how the process works, and maintaining good relationships with our counties, with Northampton and Lehigh County, is crucial. We don't want to go back to the dark days of 10 or 15 years ago. Yep. So next we have a personnel matter that a board member would like to bring before the board. Personnel matters, and I can't see on the screen whether Attorney Marcon is there, but I believe personnel matters are subject to and eligible for executive session treatment. Is that correct, Attorney Marcon?
That's correct.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Colin, let us know when we're out of exec.
We're out. Colin's indicating we are out, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Marcon, can you please review the matters discussed in exec session?
Yes, thank you. The committee went into executive session to discuss personnel and management matters. There was also a brief discussion about security matters. No decision-making, deliberations, or votes occurred during the session.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Marcon. Does anyone have anything else they want to bring before the exec committee? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.